of the mock debate tournament. It's going to be between Arco and Moot Verick. The proposition of the debate is defending non-human animal testing is justified for the advancement of human medicine, and Arco is defending that, and Moot Verick is opposing that. To both contesters, good luck.
Thanks, therapist. Moot, do you have a preference on who goes first?
No, not really.
Okay, I think I'll go first just because I'm taking the affirmative, and then you can take the negation afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. So I don't have a long argument. I'm just using the straightforward one that you'll hear commonly, which is that animal testing has helped us eradicate many deadly diseases, and it continues to do so in our current time. One very prominent example is the COVID vaccine that we're seeing right now. That wouldn't have been possible without animal testing. The only way we got it so fast is because of animal testing, and it's going to save millions of lives. So that type of action, I think, justifies the use of non-human animal testing for the advancement of human medicine and well-being. And I have a few sort of defensive things I want to bring up. If you say animal testing is not justified because it violates non-human animal rights, then my question would be, what would you replace animal testing with? You could say, all right, well, we should test on humans. But at that point, I would ask, what is justifying testing on humans then? Because many of the ethical problems that would apply to non-human animals that would motivate you to test on humans would also apply to humans. So why is one not justified and the other one justified? They seem to me to be companions in guilt, and there's an obvious symmetry breaker in my mind between non-human animals, and that has to do with an existential understanding of life. And the other thing I would say is, you might say, well, we should have no testing at all, to which I would respond, that I think would be a far greater moral failure than testing would be, because we would allow billions of humans to die from preventable diseases. And so basically that's my argument. Animal testing has helped human well-being and health. The ethical reasons for not doing animal testing would equally apply to human testing. And if you say there's no testing that we could do, then that's a greater moral failure than doing the testing in the first place. So those are sort of my arguments for why animal testing is justified.
Okay, should I go?
Yeah, it's all your.
So consider this simple hypothetical. The purpose of a hypothetical is to prove that it is not justified to cause someone a great harm for a small benefit. For example, there are some boys who are in a cave and want to like light up the cave, but they want to they have to torch something, but they can't find anything. Like there are other things, but it takes like lot of effort, time and effort to like torch them. But they have a cat, like nearby cat, and so they decided to like put it on fire, where like burn it to death. Is this behavior justified? Probably not. Like I don't think there are many people who will say that it is justified. Like what's the problem with the behavior? Because it causes someone a great harm for a very little benefit. Like this is not like very controversial assumption. It is wrong to cause someone a great harm for a very little benefit of your own. Then the question comes like, is animal testing justified? Like meets that criteria. Animal testing, does animal testing gives us enough benefit to justify the moral harm? I don't know actually. I have read some like articles which say that like about 95% of the medicines which are produced through animal testing, which appear safe, are not actually end up being safe after human testing. So these medicines have to be tested on humans anyway. Now I don't like really trust these sources because I haven't looked into it, and I don't trust short articles like these. Things are often more complicated than that. But like if we keep it at face value, it doesn't seem to meet that criteria. Uh, like uh, it doesn't seem to give us the great benefit. Like there are a few exceptions I could think of my mind, like the discovery of DNA, but these are like broad things which we all have in common. Like when you come to specific drug testing, such as Parkinson's, you are probably not going to get much out of testing animals. Now, I don't claim to be an authority on this, just my intuition. So it doesn't seem to cross that criterion. So these drugs has to be tested on humans anyway. So to answer to when you said like what we are going to replace it with, the problem actually with human testing is that most of it is illegal because like paid human testing, you can't pay someone to, like there are lots of restrictions around it. So if we get remove that, we can replace these paid human testings with voluntary human testing with involuntary animal testing. um, Regarding this is like very cliche example when it comes to animals rights, but is it justified to do animal testing on severely mentally handicapped human, like those who have the same level of intelligence as an animal which is being tested? Most people have like very strong intuition that like we should not test on humans, but for some reason this does not make sense to me. Like like like
I still can't hear you. I see that you're lit up.
oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, great.
Oh, when did I cut out actually? Can you?
The last thing that I remember was you were talking about testing on severely handicapped humans, and then it cut out for me.
Oh, okay. So if an action is moral for a person A to do, and if it's immoral for person B to do, then you have to give some morally relevant criteria for which the action becomes immoral and moral. Like for the similar reasons, if it's moral to do some action on A, and if it's immoral to do the same action on B, like there has to be some morally relevant difference between A and B. Like that seems like of course obviously true to me. So like what is that difference between a severely mentally challenged human and like an animal? Considering that some animals are smarter than severely mentally challenged humans, like how do you like fit that up? And the difference between like testing on actual normal humans and normal animals and normal humans is they're being voluntary. When you like pay someone, or like if someone volunteers to like have the medicine tested, like they know the risk, they evaluate the risk, and they choose to take the risk. This is not the same. This is not the true in case of animal testing, which most I think are not animals are not capable of giving like consent or something. So yeah, that's my opening statement.
Cool. Yeah. Well, first, I just want to state where we agree. I do agree that animal testing is not 100% effective. And I'm happy to grant that there are some forms of animal testing which wouldn't be justified, and we should move away from testing like that. I mean, if it's demonstrated that doing certain toxology tests on animals doesn't translate to humans, there's no reason for us to do that type of testing on the animal. And it seems to me like the industry standard is when we learn that that type of test is ineffective, we no longer use it. So I don't think that that's, as we do these animal tests, we're learning which ones are effective and not. We don't have perfect information about animal testing. So we're in a period where we're going to have higher rates of ineffective testing, but that's going to become less ineffective over time. So that's sort of the first thing I just want to say. We agree there. The other thing I wanted to talk about is you bring up this notion of consent between the non-human animal and the human animal. And that's a tricky question because I don't think that paying humans to do something would qualify as consent, because in many cases, humans who are paid to do something are coerced into that environment. So, for example, like a wage labor, someone would consent to working a minimum wage job, but it's coerced because the alternative between doing that or the minimum wage job would be something like starvation or homelessness. It's not really a choice. So I just question paying humans to do it. Now, if we lived in a utopia where everyone was getting paid a certain amount of money, and then there was a human who volunteered because of some duty towards humanity to do this testing, well, surely I would grant that that's consent. But I don't think that's the context that we're working in right now. And many people who would do the human testing would get paid to do that would be people struggling to find jobs. We're not going to have someone who's making $120,000 at a tech company volunteer to do human testing that's risky. It's going to be those people in the bottom of our society who are coerced into things like that because of their economic standing. So I think there is still a question of consent being a problem for humans who would quote unquote volunteer. I don't count that as volunteerism there. The other point I wanted to talk about was the justification for severely handicapped humans. Basically, it seems to me like you're asking, name the trait between a handicapped human and then an animal, a non-human animal. What's the difference? And I don't know if the difference has to be relative or indexed to the handicapped person. I think it could just merely be the extrinsic value. Those people in society who are guardians of the handicapped person, they're the ones who are deciding what is appropriate or not for that person. Our society is what's deciding what is appropriate or not for that person. So even though the handicapped person can't consent, we are safeguarding them. And in the same way that we would safeguard the handicapped person, we would also safeguard an animal who cannot consent. For example, like a horse, which has a lot more moral value in our society, or dogs or cats have higher moral value in our society than, say, something like a rat. So the trait there would be something like the value that we as a society apply to it, to that animal. And of course, it would be great if we could get to a point where we could have value like that for many of the animals, but even so, there would still be a justification for us using non-human animals to test on them. I would also grant that we could test on these handicapped patients, but I don't think we should test on them first and foremost.
Okay. So this criteria of consent, okay, I don't actually agree with it. I don't think most people agree with it. But even if I give you, what if we make it illegal to say if you have a certain income below, say, some arbitrary amount of money, if you have income below arbitrary amount of money, you can't pay people to have experiments on you. Like that should solve the problem. Like then it's no longer exploitative, which I think is a much better word than to say that it's a non-consensual. Um,
I have
and wait a second, wait a second. Like just to expand on this consent point, most people are not going to starve to death if they don't quit their jobs. We have like lots of welfare state in our country. People generally have relatives, friends, family, donations, and even if they don't get any of it, most people advanced human society, like people existed before we developed these farming and stuff. Like people still and do like use other methods such as scavenging, begging, and stuff. So like it's not like they are literally going to starve to death if they quit their job. Um, what else? Um, okay, so like let me when someone is like very in love with that other person, like if that person says no, like it can be a very like it can be almost equivalent to being starved to death in a way, in a like not literally but like in a metaphorical way. Do you think like it's coercive if like someone like says no to like a marriage offer or something? Because the alternative is much worse, like not being with
no.
the someone you love.
What makes it coercive is not because of something like, well, the alternative is much worse psychologically. It's the alternative is much, if you don't work, you're going to end up losing your life, rather than if you don't get married to the person you love because they aren't in love with you. That's not anything that you're not going to lose your life because of that, not because
Like
someone
many
else made that choice.
wait like a lot of people do commit end up committing suicide because of.
But the question there is, does the breakup cause the suicide? I don't think so. It might be a
Yeah,
trigger, but it's
of
not the
course.
cause. There's underlying causes there that would lead them to make that choice.
No, like I think it's very much the breakup which is the cause, but I don't want to want to like this is supposed to be debate about animal rights, not like
Right.
the moral value of animals, rather than the debate about what constitute meaningful consent or not.
Right, but I don't. So
But
we don't need. I think when it comes to like testing on non on the handicapped human, for example, they cannot consent. And one of the arguments that you're posing for the animals is they cannot consent. So then we cannot test on handicapped humans. Okay. So then you're going to say, well, like you already brought up, let's make a rule where you make a certain amount of money and only those people would be able to do the testing. But someone like that, we're not going to get large enough sample sizes where we can inject an experimental vaccine and see what side effects happen.
like it's still more reliable than testing on animals.
How is it more
Like it
reliable than testing on animals?
bec-
Because right now,
because animals are.
the COVID vaccine was tested on animals, and that's how we moved to the next phase. And then it was successful in human trials, and that's how we got the final vaccine. In fact, the development of the RNA, that the RNA process where we change the DNA of the immune system to make the antibodies to fight the spike protein of the virus, came about because of testing in mice. We wouldn't have that key that unlocked the COVID vaccine without doing the RNA testing on mice.
um, First of all, like whether or not a particular vaccine like first was tested on animal, it doesn't really matter. We have to look at the class data, and we have to look at the class data on the number of vaccines like tested on animals and how many of them were approved on animals first, and how many of them were later after being approved on animal was disapproved on humans. Like you have to look at that ratio to to come to any meaningful conclusion. And as far as I know, on the sources which I look, it's like 95%. Um,
But would you agree
so
that that 5% is justified?
I mean, if like you have to look at the like if you already know that if I'm going to test on this animal, then it's going to like have this amount of benefit. Yeah, it is, but we don't know if like before we already tested. So like
Moot,
it all boils down to, do you have enough confidence that the small amount of harm you are doing is going to outweigh
but that's a
the
problem.
benefit?
That's an epistemic problem here. If the standard is, if we already know it's going to be successful, then it's justified, we wouldn't need testing in the first place. If we had that certainty,
No,
testing wouldn't be
yeah,
needed. We would
wait a
just have the
second.
medical advancement.
Like it's probably has to be good enough
Okay, so
so that it
what's the
meets
good
the
enough
criteria.
threshold?
I don't know. Like about your good enough threshold will probably disagree with mine good enough threshold. Like it's
Right.
more of like,
But
but
are you granting that there is a good enough threshold that would justify testing on animals?
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. It's the same question as if, like, if I could, like, if aliens come and said that we are going to blow up Earth unless you like kill that person, I'll be the first one to like kill him.
Right.
But you must have enough confidence like that there are aliens, and like this is a reliable information. Like I don't think we have that enough reliability testing on particular human actually does advance this particular now there are some
Well,
medicines which has been tested on animals which did advance, like as I give you the discovery of DNA and DNA, but when it comes to specific diseases, it's not really the data is not data is not
but
data does not support animal testing.
there are historic examples where testing on animals did give us life-changing information. For example, insulin, the discovery of insulin came about because people were experimenting with dogs. They took 10 dogs and they removed pancreases from some of the dogs, and the dogs that didn't have pancreases developed diabetes. And then they did later experiments on these animals by extracting insulin from other animals,
Again,
and then they injected it in the dogs with diabetes, and they found that their blood sugar levels went down. And then they did those tests in humans where they took the animal insulin, injected it in humans with diabetes, and then they found out that, okay, we can use diabetes to help, sorry, we can use insulin to fight diabetes. That animal testing has saved millions of people's lives who have diabetes. And it enabled us to make a plant-based alternative so we no longer have to use animals. And that research helps us with animals who have diabetes. So if we're trying to safeguard the well-being of animals, animal testing also helps animals, not just humans.
like you can't look at that specific data point and say like this represents the trend. You have to look at like the broader data point. And like I agree, like there are some things like I myself give you an example of DNA which was heavily tested on my like discovery of DNA, which came about because of the experiments on mice. So I don't disagree that there are some things which in which case like perhaps the animal testing is justified, but when it comes to broad diseases such as cancer and Parkinson and those stuff, like data is not for you. Like you have to look at the class of data. You can't just say like specific point. Like I can give you a source if you want.
Oh, no,
But
no.
it's
Well,
like the 95% chance that that drug which was like approved on animals is not going to be approved on humans. So like I don't think the data is good enough.
right, but there's different types of testing. So you're talking about what's called applied animal testing, where you test a drug on the animal. And if a drug is shown to not be effective, if the animal testing is shown to not be effective, then we wouldn't use that practice. But that doesn't mean that we get rid of animal testing wholesale. All that is an argument for is we need to change the animal testing practices. That's not an argument for getting rid of animal testing as a whole, because there's still that small 5%. So even if I just grant the number 95%, we don't fact check that. That 5% that is efficient, that is successful animal testing, that will save countless lives, that 5% is justified.
I mean, yeah, hypothetically, that 5% justified. The point is that how do you know which 5% is which 5%? Like, how do you know that this testing will benefit and which this testing is going to pass the cost benefit analysis? This testing is not going to pass cost benefit analysis. When you look at the broader data, it does not. like pass the cost benefit analysis, and that's the point. Like
Right, but so we
you
can
are assuming that we can isolate these 5% cases. I don't know if we could.
we can get better. I'm not assuming that we can get 100%. What I am assuming is that we can make the animal testing more efficient. And the way we would do that, you asked me, how would we do it? It would have to be something like induction. We would have to look at the probabilities. So if the probability that testing this drug on mice has like a 99% chance of not transferring on humans, then that's good reason to abandon testing that drug on mice. But if we find that injecting vaccines in mice transfers to humans at a 99% level, then of course we would do that. I can give you another example. Rather than testing drugs in psychology, we can run unethical experiments for humans on animals in order for us to understand the mental health of humans. But the animals don't die. These things would be like stressing the animal out and then seeing how they would respond to like certain types of therapies or certain type of environment changes. And then we would see if that type of thing would correlate with humans. And that would be not some kind of toxology testing. That's the standard for how we do animal testing in psychology. We use things like rat studies in order for us to determine if that would translate into humans. And it translates very well into humans for mental health. It's a foundation of psychology.
I don't know, like how ethical these things can be considered. It's obviously a lot more ethical than actually testing drugs, but let's limit ourselves to drugs and not psychology. It becomes too broad of a topic.
But that's part of animal testing. That's a big. I mean, so animal testing includes studies like that. It's not just like injecting them or harming them. So there's a wide range. Some animal testing called basic animal testing is where we look at the physiology. Like, for example, insulin. How does insulin work in a pig? How does insulin work in a human? And then there's other types of animal testing, which is applied. Like, how will this medicine impact pigs, for example, because they have a similar digestive system to us? Or how will it impact their cardiovascular disease?
Again, like I agree with you. Like if we pass the cost benefit analysis, like of course there's perhaps there are some things which pass the cost benefit analysis, but there are others not. Also, what do you think about like the testing for cosmetics? Like for example, rabbits are used for testing cosmetics are inserted into their eyes and to see how they react. Like, do you think at least that is completely unjustifiable? And considering that psychology is not that important of a field as I mean, I don't like it's already suffering from that reproduction problem. I don't know how reliable it is, but it seems like these fields are not very valuable in itself.
I don't consider cosmetic testing to be part of medicine. So from my point of view, that seems like it's kind of out of the scope. But I would just grant that I don't see good reason for us to test on animals. Like, we can just put lipstick on a human, and if they get pimples, so what? I don't really see a point in testing that on humans. As far as the replicability problem in psychology, yeah, it is harder to replicate studies in psychology than it is in physics, but that's sort of the nature of soft science, and that's going to be par for the course. So even though it's not as replicable as other types of sciences, that doesn't mean that those studies are now like debunked foolproof or sorry, wholesale. We can still get value like that.
It simply shows that it does not pass the cost benefit analysis. That's my point. Like considering psychology like have so many false positives, like it does not pass the cost benefit analysis. Not saying that it has literally no value, it's just that it probably don't. Regarding like it's not a part of medicine, regarding that cosmetic is not a part of medicine, I don't know, like psychological testing is how much of a part of medicine, but I don't want to like go into like definition, like semantics of what a medicine is.
Sure. I mean, I guess I have a question about you talk about this cost benefit analysis. What is that standard for the cost benefit analysis?
It is wrong to cause a large amount of suffering for a small amount of benefit. Like if you're like going to ask me like give me like numbers and stuff, I don't think I don't know. I don't I your judgment will disagree with my judgment, and there's really nothing.
Let's say that 200 rats are decapitated while still alive in order for us to make a vaccine that's going to save something like 10 million people around the world. Is that cost benefit analysis, is that above the threshold?
Yeah, it seems fine to me. I don't know, like how much like millions mean. I don't even comprehend like that how much that big of like word it. But my point is that there is some threshold. I think everybody agrees that there's some threshold, and I don't think that medicines are going to cross that threshold for most people.
Well, I mean, vaccines certainly do.
I
The
don't know,
current
like
COVID vaccine is a prime example. Like that's
again
impacting
again
the
again
entire world.
you're like you are taking one sample size, like one specific point, and like applying it to the whole class. No, we have to look at the whole class itself and see whether or not, like a priori, like before we test it, to
But Moot,
justify that animal testing was justified, we have to say, like if we do animal testing, this is going to, you can't just say like after the experiment is on, see, like it worked. Like no,
but
before
this
you did the test, you have to have reliable confidence that this is going to be justified.
all I need is one case where it's justified for the proposition to obtain.
Yeah, then it's the, if you how that's how you interpret the, like then there's no point it, but like it's like saying like murder is debate like murder is justified, it's not justified. You know what, like if aliens come up and like say that they kill this person, otherwise I'm going to blow otherwise we are going to blow up the earth, then it's justified. Yeah, like gotcha, murder is justified, at least in
It's
one
not
particular
it's not
case,
a
debate
gotcha.
over.
It's not a gotcha. So as like animal testing, whenever we're saying it's not justified, we're saying that there are no cases where it would be justified. That's what it means to say it is not justified. But when we say it is justified, it
Stone.
doesn't, I'm not saying that all cases are justified, but there are some that would be. And I'm just bringing up the COVID example because it's one that's impacting our lives. But there are other ones that I mentioned, like the insulin example. Many of the other vaccines we use, like the flu vaccine that we do every year, those things are also done via animal testing. Our antibiotics are tested on animals.
Stone, how do you interpret the proposition? Like, is it that even if one example like cross that threshold, like therefore like proposition is false or something? Right. Like you are given the proposition, right?
I think we have to make the case to the audience.
Like if that's a proposition, like the proposition is completely OP. Like you won the moment you like won the toss. Uh,
Well, in the spirit of charitability, I'll grant that we can be a little soft on it, and it doesn't have to just be one.
yeah.
So we
Like
can agree then, and the audience can vote via this standard, that having a little bit of room for some justified, some tiny amount of justified cases, like in extreme examples, does not defeat the proposition. I'm fine granting that, Moot. So moving forward from that, just because I'm only bringing up the COVID example, that doesn't mean that is the only type of animal testing that I think is justified. I've also mentioned the psychological testing and the other vaccines and insulin. There are many examples in our history where animal testing has helped us. And I've admitted that there is some inefficiency, but that is an argument to get better at the animal testing, not an argument to get rid of it wholesale.
if we like, it's an argument that if we can't get better, we have to get rid of it. Like if there was a better way, like people would have already done it. Like so, considering that with like most of some of the smartest people working on this haven't been able to, like could not
I,
like work it up. Like
I actually
it shows that like there's some problem with
I actually
the
don't think that
particular.
the reason why it continues to be inefficient is because people haven't found a better way. I think that has to do with the broader population's beliefs about animals. They just think that animals have very little moral value to begin with. Most of the scientists out there are meat eaters. I can make that assumption because most humans are meat eaters. So the scientists who are doing this animal testing, they don't have good reason to think it's unjustified to start with. We have to make the argument, first of all, that animals have some type of moral value that is being infringed upon. So the scientists don't have that belief. That's why I think the inefficiency of animal testing continues, because they just don't really care about the animals. It's more neglect than anything.
And I don't know about the scientists themselves, but I think like it's a shared human tendency to like reduce suffering overall. Like even if people miscalculate on who's suffering is like how much value to give to who's suffering. But I think everyone agrees that we should reduce human suffering. Like as I said in like my opening statement, like if I burned the cat just so that I could see the cave, it's like for a few seconds longer, it seems unjustified. Like I think everyone agrees that suffering is bad. I don't think that's controversial, including the scientists. And second of all, like animal testing is just not like it's also a matter of money. Animals cost money, like considering that how much regulation government and even the PETA, like how much pressure PETA and the government puts. So I think there are plenty of incentives for these scientists to have a much more efficient way to to do these things efficiently. Uh, but if they can't,
Well,
like this,
they are trying.
yeah, they
They
are trying,
are,
but they haven't succeeded. Like they haven't succeeded,
because
and
we don't
it's
know the outcomes. When we're testing an experimental drug, we don't know how it's going to react on anything. That's part of the reason why we test on the
Ye-
animals in the first
like
place.
it's not that we don't like. Wait a second. It's not that we don't have any idea. We have a very bad idea. Like
Sure, that's what I mean by
it's
any idea.
that,
When I say any idea, I
and
mean we
that's
have
the
no.
problem. It's that the problem. Like we don't have enough. We don't have enough confidence that is going to pass the cost benefit analysis. Like that's my point. Like they
But that's
don't
an
have enough idea. Like whether
epistemic standard that's going to leave us handicapped with medical developments. So, for example, what would you replace animal testing with? If we can't test this drug on animals,
paid human experiments, because these drugs has to be tested on humans anyway, right?
right? So then we're going to be testing on the people in the lowest part of our income, and you're going to say, well, we'll just have it
No,
so that
we can make it
only people
illegal.
over a certain income. But
We
then
can make it illegal. We can make it
the problem with that is people who are already getting paid a living wage aren't going to volunteer for risky medical experiments. We're not going to get enough volunteers to
if
get a
money is
sample
high
size.
if money is high enough, people will. Like it's simply a matter of how much money
I
people
don't
are willing to spend. Like how much people really want that particular medicine. Like how much customers
I
demand
don't
that particular
know.
medicine. Like
I don't
it's
know if people would accept $500,000 if the medicine that they're going to take has a chance of killing them. That doesn't seem to me like a wager most people would make.
like people do take it. Like I can give you a video of like some particular scientist, like it's from an interview of some like black market medicines, like who basically test on lipids and stuff, like simply on bets or something. Like
Right,
these
but the
people are
context
playing
of
in the black
the
market. These like animal testing, these are people are like these are scientists, like very qualified scientists testing drugs on themselves, like for no apparent benefit in the black market. I don't see.
right,
uh,
but people in the black market who sign up for those studies are those
No, these are
who
scientists themselves.
okay, but
These are scientists themselves.
that's
Or
not
people
going to
not.
be a large sample size that we're going to need for these studies. And testing on
It is not
yourself
necessary.
is very different than testing on other individuals who don't understand the risk, because part of these studies you need to not tell them the risk to make sure placebo doesn't take part in the study. They have to be blind in some of them.
We can have placebo trials. We can have placebo blind. What to say? Blind trials?
But there's a
Placebo
problem
blind?
with
What do they say?
consent.
Double
There's a
blind trials.
problem with consent and a placebo. If the drug is going to risk your life or risk lifelong injury, which is what we're trying to see will happen, that is a reasonable conclusion that can happen in the randomized controlled trials. That would have to be unknown to the patient signing up. They would have to have no
They would.
reason to suspect that. They could not consent. They would not be consenting by definition of the randomized controlled trial.
No, they know like there's a 50% chance they're going to take this drug, and there's like some percent chance, like 10%, 20%,
They
to have
can't
this
know that the drug's
effect.
risk would include the death or something like that.
No,
It would
every drug
spoil the
has a
data.
very small chance of that. No, literally every drug have very small chance of that. I can like joke on my apple to that. So, so I don't see like it's this just that the chance of these drugs will be a little bit higher.
I don't think it'll be a little bit higher. I mean, the threshold that the drug has to pass in order to be safe has to be very, very high. If it doesn't pass that threshold, just based on like, I don't know, our previous studies,
Wait a
it's going to necessarily be experimental and high risk.
Like, do you realize that drugs are still tested on humans? Like animals testing does not work, but they are still tested on humans, like volunteers. Like, why don't you think that if we start paying people, that this is going to, the number of people volunteering will go up, like by a large amount,
Yeah,
and
they're
perhaps
already
this number
they're
of wait a
already
second, wait a
paid.
second, wait a second. Like if we like remove these regulations on these people to like give money to have to doing experiment, why don't you think the number of people rising because of this is going to outweigh the ineffective animal testing? Like you do realize that human testing is much more efficient than animal testing. So even if
Hold
small
on,
amount of
but
humans showing up, it's going to outweigh that threshold.
that more efficient human testing is taking place in a context where animal testing already happens. We cannot compare it to a world where there is no animal testing. It's more efficient in a world where we have animal testing. If we had no animal testing at all, we would see the same inefficiencies when it comes to humans potentially. We don't know. We can't make that claim. We cannot make the claim that it is more efficient.
Like animals like when you are trying to make a medicine for humans, you expect your subjects to be human because animals and humans are different. Like most of the drugs which are going to work or not work on animals is going to be different from the drugs which work and not work on humans. So because of the increase,
we test certain things on animals that have similar homology. So, for example, we might see similar homology in the pancreas for the pigs. So we test pancreas drugs for humans on pigs, and we have pretty good results from that. Or we might say that the heart from pigs is also pretty good. In fact, we're able to do heart transplants from pigs. That came about because of animal testing, where we take a valve from a pig heart and put it in a human heart and save their life. That type of thing would be excluded if we took away the class of animal testing. So even though there are these classes of drugs where it passes animal trials, but then we do studies in humans and we find out that it's not going to be effective, the goal of the animal trial is not just to find out if it's going to be an effective drug. The goal of the animal trial is to find out if it's going to kill us. When it goes through the animal testing, it moves on to the next one. It will say, okay, it's not going to kill humans. It's safe enough to test on humans. Now we'll test to see if it's going to be effective. And then we find out it's not effective. We don't follow that drug. But the goal of the animal testing worked. When we say the 95% standard didn't work, what we're saying is 95% of the drugs were not effective in humans, but the animal testing was effective at seeing if it was safe enough to test the humans. So we're confusing the goals there.
Wait a second. The point of a drug is to say is to find out whether or not it has side effects. Like that's the point of a drug. Like it's not necessarily to see if it's going to die. Like most drugs are not going to kill you. Um, unless taken in very large amounts.
Part of it is to find out
but wait a second. 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 Let me complete my sentence. The 95% the probability comes from you check on animal, there's no side effects, no one is dying, and then you check on humans, and there are side effects, and there are some adverse problems associated with humans. That's the 95% ratio says. Like there are 95% of drugs which are safe on animals but are not safe on humans. That's what the 95%, and that's what we are trying to test on medicines. Like we are trying to test if particular medicine is safe or not. And I'm simply saying animals are just not very good a substitute for humans.
My understanding is that 95% was about effectiveness of the drug, not safety. And just a meta point about the debate, I'm not trying to interrupt you. I think there's a lag because there will be a gap, and I think you're done, and I'll start to talk, and then you'll start yelling, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. It's not because I'm trying to overtalk you. It just sounds like you finished to me. And I think there might be like a 3-second delay. But
Okay, I apologize.
no, it's fine. I just wanted to clear that up. So the 95%, my understanding of the 95% was that the drug was ineffective in humans, not that the 95% was that that it was like not safe or not. So just to be clear, the testing in humans is to test two things. If the side effects are going to be worse than the benefit, and if it's an effective use of treating. The animal phase is to see if it's safe enough to test in humans, first of all, and if it would be effective. So if it's not effective in animals, there's no point in continuing. If it's not safe in the animals, it's not safe to test in humans. So the goal of the animal testing has those two prongs, as does the human testing. So when we say it's ineffective, the relationship between the two, we have to really be careful what we mean by the ineffectiveness. My understanding was that the effectiveness of the goal, treating the symptoms, didn't translate as well. But the whole point of it, even getting to the human trials, means that the animal testing was successful in that it was safe enough to be tested on humans.
Like that's like empirical problem. I have to look up the sources for checking that one. Can't like clear up right now. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But yeah. Do you have any other points?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered everything. So I don't know how much time we have left. Well, if you want, we could do closing statements.
No, like I want to more explore more on like why do you think it's more justified to test a drug on animals before it is tested on severely handicapped humans? Like, why do you think like there's a priority of animals before humans?
Well, I think humans have something different than animals. I think humans are able to think about our lives and understand that we have a lifespan and understand things that animals can't. Like, I think I would call that existential. We're able to reflect existentially on our life, and I think that leads to a greater degree of suffering or anxiety that wouldn't take place in, say, a non-human animal. And even though the handicapped patient wouldn't have that mental experience, those who are watching the handicapped patient would suffer at them being tested. And so it harms humans for us to do that testing. It would harm humans not in the experiment to do that kind of testing. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's not justified to test on handicapped patients.
Okay, I will propose you a series of hypotheticals. Like you are saying that if I know that there's someone who is being tested on, I'll get a very bad reaction to it. I will get upset about it. Like, is that what you're saying?
Just a particular kind. So for the people who are handicapped, who are being tested on because they are handicapped, I think that would add a lot of suffering to people in our society. Yeah.
Even if these people are like nobody likes them, like these are some homeless people who have no friends, family, or whatsoever.
Oh yeah, I think that would be maybe even worse, because then we're just like treating them like sort of untouchable people that have no rights or anything like that. And I think treating humans as if they had no rights all of a sudden, I think would be a great harm to a lot of humans.
But aren't you begging the question? Like, can't someone argue that, like, the way you are treating the animals, like, you still haven't given me a good reason. Like, like, the same can be said of animals also. Like, I think there are a lot of people who are members of PETA who get like depressed about the way we treat animals. Like, not just for medicine. I'm talking about like some various like very trivial shit, like more trivial shit such as eating it for taste pleasure. Like I think there are a lot of people who get a lot of upset about it. What about that?
I do grant that there are humans who get really upset at animals being treated poorly. I'm one of those humans. But I don't think that the number of humans that get upset at things like animal agriculture, for example, are as high as the number of humans that would be upset seeing other humans be treated in certain ways.
Okay. Okay. So, I think I understand the position now, and I'm going to give a series of hypotheticals, and you give me like a simple yes or no answer. Okay. Um, like for example, say I get very depressed when other people's. I know that other people watch pornography. Like, should this be an argument against pornography? Like simply because I get depressed about it. Even if you say like there are not very the large number of people, if you go into very religious society, there are a lot of large people who will get upset about some trivial things like this. So do you think it's
That's
an
not the
argument
kind of,
against these things?
that's not the kind of upset that I think it's not equivalent here. So thinking that someone else is doing something like wrong in accordance to, say, a religious doctrine or something is different than being upset that someone like them is being harmed. There's a difference
Not
between
just
someone acting immoral, like doing something that they think is a sin or a vice, for example, versus being cruel. I think looking at porn is not seen as cruel, but it would be seen as maybe a vice, while testing on a human without consent that is the weakest among us would be seen as very cruel.
the point is simply that how you feel about things does not how you feel about how other people behave, or how other people be like how other people behave does not like give have any moral consideration.
I think it
Simply
does. I think that's what the
why do
sorry.
separation? I could be upset about various things independent of religion, which may sound like I don't think like people are disgusting at certain things such as pornography because it's written in the literature. It's because we get disgusted by things. That's why they are written in the literature. I think you like have the entire
Well,
concept backwards.
it's the nature of what the disgust is at. The disgust in pornography is targeting some type of moral failing of the individual. It's their own purity. But the disgust at someone testing on the weakest among us is targeting the cruelty of the tester. And those are not analogous. That's the
Yeah,
symmetry right there.
uh, it is about the moral failing of the tester, right? Like it's the moral like the person who is testing his subject, who is committing a vice, who is being cruel, and that's cruel is being disgusted at. And so similarly the same thing as in like it's the vice, like not being able to control your urges, that is being disgusted at. And the same case with other thing like um, if I start like torturing people, I think a lot of people are going to disgusted by it. But that's because of my vice. Like act, I'm being cruel. I'm performing a vice.
Right, but what's grounding the moral standing here is our understanding that the person being tortured has a mind. That's also what's grounding
Like
the advocacy against animal testing, is that like the animal has a mind. But what's different here is that the experience of the non-human animal is not on the same level as the experience as the human. We already grant that there's a difference in rights between humans and non-human animals. We have different duties to humans that we do not have to animals.
I agree that we have different uses, but it does not mean we have different rights. I think we have duty to like I have like a father has a duty to care for his son. Not in the way that he has duty to care for any other human being, but it's about care, not harm. Like
But I think that's a
like the
positive
father
right.
has equal duty to not harm his like the father has an equal duty to not harm his children as much as his duty to not harm
That
other people.
that is a positive right. So there are negative rights and
Yeah,
positive
yeah,
rights. Yeah, duties towards
yeah.
something
Like
would be
no, Like positive rights can be unequal, but negative rights has to be equal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's my point. And when we are talking about animal testing, we are talking about negative rights, not positive rights. Like we are saying
Right.
that the
And
tester,
I think
we
that
are saying that tester.
I don't agree that it's just negative rights in the animal testing case. Because
Of
what
course, it
we're
is
going
negative
to test
rights.
on, we're going animal testing will lead to human testing. So it is true of both parties that there will be testing on them. They share that. They're in the same boat. What is different there is that we have duties to the humans that we do not have to the animals. And that's why we do a phase 1 of animal testing and then a phase 2 on humans. Because of our duties to humans, because of the positive rights in humans, that's why we have the phase 1 of animal testing.
Wait a second. Like we have. I think you're begging the question when you assume that there's a difference between there's that's why we test animals before humans. Like I think you're begging the question. Like you're already assuming
You
that
already
animals are inferior.
you already granted that we have positive duties to humans that we don't have to animals. That so you agree to the premise that
Yeah,
I'm asserting here. You've already granted that.
yeah, but yeah, I agree that we have positive duties to human, which that is positive duty to benefit other humans, like to give benefit to other humans, which we don't have to, like to animals. But we are not talking about giving benefit. We are talking about causing harm. When you test an animal, you are causing harm, not giving them benefit,
I think
like
that
unequal benefit.
I think the vaccine is about giving benefits to humanity, and there's a tension there between
Yeah,
the conflict of not causing harm and our duties to human flourishing. That conflict is why this is a debate in the first place. But it is about the benefit to humanity.
yeah, it is about the benefit, but it's not about rights, right? Rights and good are different things. Like
I do
something
think
which
it is
can be good
about.
may not be right.
I do
Wait
think
a
it is.
second. Like for example, if my some of one of my loved one give me some like very precious gift, say a guitar or something, and like I throw it out, I have a right to throw it out, but it's not good to throw it out. Like these are two different things. Like we should not do something does not translate that we don't have right to do it.
I think we have a right to our fellow man, a positive right, a duty to our fellow man to make sure that they have a certain level of safety and well-being, especially if we know how to do it. If we know how to prevent diseases for our fellow man, we have to do that.
but but we are talking about causing harm, right? Like that's a good, like we have a duty to do good to other people, but we don't have a right to harm other people. Like we are talking about harm, not good.
Yeah, of course. And
Like rights, not good.
we often will harm animals in order for humans to flourish.
I disagree that it's a morally good thing to do. Oh,
I'm
morally
not
good
saying
thing,
it's a
or is
morally
it
good
right?
thing to do. I'm saying it's justified. Those are different. I don't like it, but it's the better choice of not doing it. I mean, for example, crop deaths. Okay, crop deaths occur even for vegans. Animals die for vegans to eat food. It's just a fact.
Wait a second. That's not true. That's not true. The like the crops which are used, like you have to make fodder crops too, right? Like you have to feed these animals. So the number of crops which are required to produce like same amount of food is larger
That's
for
not
meat.
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that even if all crops were vegan, we would still kill animals because there would be vermins that would be killed. They would use pesticides that would kill the birds that are eating the food. Those animals still die even for crops that are vegan. For
Yeah,
mass
but
production of these
I will.
foods, animals are killed. Animals are killed because of our duty to feed humanity. We already make this choice in many parts of our life where we have a positive duty to humans that we don't have to animals, and that positive duty supersedes the negative rights that we have to animals.
I will simply say that I think most vegan, me being a vegetarian, will say that uh, will say that the crop that's past the threshold. Like we should like minimize as much as possible, but not to like minimize like as much as possible if it means like we're all going to starve to death. Like it passes the threshold, but mediating does not.
Right. And I'm not making an argument for meeting here. The analogy I'm drawing is there's a threshold we pass that justifies it for food. We do that with food. The number of animals that die for food is far greater than the number of animals that would die in animal testing.
Yeah, but the benefit we get from food is much bigger than the benefit we get from like at least some drug testing.
I know,
But that's
so
an
that's where
empirical claim.
that's where we disagree. I think the benefit from things like vaccines, from the mental health studies we have, from the toxology of the medicines that are being added into our lives, I think all of those things outweigh that cross that threshold, that cost benefit analysis.
I'm just going to link this blog or like it's from Peter. Like take it, have it on face value. But it says like something which you might disagree with. Like I think that's simply an empirical claim which can't be like resolved on it in a debate. So I think we should give our closing statements now.
Yeah, sure. A lot of this article we've gone through, as you said. I mean, do you want me to go rehash some of the things in that article?
No, just give your closing statements.
Okay. Who do you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you can have the final word. Just give me a second to collect my thoughts. Okay. So the proposition today is non-human animal testing is justified for the advancement of human medicine. First, I want to list some of the places that I agreed with my opponent. One is that there is inefficiency with animal testing translating to human tests. I granted that. We didn't really go into the numbers, but we both assume it's pretty high. Where we disagree about the animal testing is what that inefficiency is referring to. The nature of the inefficiency, on my view, as I understand it, is that the drug is not effective at combating the symptom, but the animal testing, one of the goals of the animal testing is to see if it is safe enough to be tested on humans in the first place. And that is where animal testing was effective. That's why it's continued to be used. Now, the question following from that is the moral argument. Why are we justified in testing on the animals first before we test on the humans? And I think it's easily granted that humans have a different moral status than non-human animals. We make many consolations, not consolations, but concessions where we choose humans over non-human animals in many cases. One example being even for vegans, crop deaths, we justify that because it passes a threshold where humans are eating. And why does it justify the threshold being passed? It's not just numbers, it's also the quality of life. We grant that humans have a different type of experience that animals have. We have an existential experience. We can understand we are living. We can understand other minds. We can understand the animal minds. We can understand that they have an experience and we can value that. The animals might not. I don't think the animals actually have that in many of the cases. It doesn't. I do grant that the animals have some moral value, but that we are often choosing between non-human animals and animals crop deaths being an example where we choose the humans over the animals because it passes a threshold. The animal testing in medicine also passes the same threshold because of that difference in our understanding of the life. We're justified in testing on the animals in a phase 1 to see if it's safe enough to test on humans. One of the refutations my interlocutor brought up was, why don't we test on handicapped patients? And there are problems of consent for the handicapped patient, which are also problems for the non-human animal. And ostensibly, I was asked, name the trait. What's the difference between the handicapped human and the non-human animal? One of the big differences is our beliefs about those humans and the fact that we are guardians for those humans. We are responsible for them. And if we were to test on the weakest among us, it would harm ourselves. It would harm our human dignity there. And that type of suffering that would come about does not justify testing on the handicapped humans. So we have the phase 1 to see if it's safe enough to test on humans, and then we test on humans, at which point I would say maybe it would be justified in some context to test on humans that we would be safeguarding. Also, we're fine with paid volunteer human testing, but there are problems if we make it all human testing where people can consent. There are issues of those being coerced who are at the bottom of the economy, who work wage labor jobs. They would take on the testing, these risky testing, and it would be riskier for humans because there wouldn't be that first phase to see if it's safe enough to be tested on humans. It would be far riskier, and it would have to be unknown to the person taking it in the randomized controlled trials. Otherwise, we would risk spoiling the data with placebo effects. If they know there's a chance of being severely ill, we would see higher rates of the severe illness occur. So because of those factors, even though there are some inefficiencies of the medicine being effective in humans, we are justified in testing on the animals to see if it's safe enough to be in humans. And I'll just list some very famous examples that have made it possible for human flourishing. One very prominent one right now is the COVID vaccine. Another one is the discovery of insulin. We've saved millions of lives because of the discovery of insulin and using dogs to do that. And we developed insulin using animal insulin, taking it from the pancreas of animals. It was only because of that research that we were able to make a plant-based alternative much later. The production of vaccines uses animals. We have to test on them for that. So there are numerous examples like that we also use animals in psychology testing. It would be unethical to cause distress to the humans, but we could cause distress to the animal to see what kind of things would help the animal in distress, and then the things that help the animal can be replicated in human trials. And it's an ethical way for us to test psychological evidence-based practices for humans. So all of these reasons, I think, justify us using animals to test for medical advancement. Of course, I think we should make it better. Of course, I think we should try to get rid of the inefficiencies as much as possible. Of course, I think we should reduce harm, but I don't think we should get rid of it wholesale. I think it's justified, and that's my position.
Can you okay? Can you wait a minute, a few seconds? I also have to put some like codes or something.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so this is a quote from it's a website from PETA, like take it at face value. But a survey from 4,451 experimental cancer drugs developed between 2003 and 2011 found that more than 93% failed after entering the first phase of human clinical trials, even though they all had been tested successfully on animals. What this means is that these drugs were tested on animals and they did not show any side effects, like not significant side effect, and they were tested on humans. And 93% of these drugs which were passed on animals did not pass on humans. The point is that the animals are just not very good substitute for humans. Things which are not harmful to animals are generally harmful to humans. And and I think that point is made up that we can like isolate a particular part, like a pig's heart is similar to like human heart, or like you can isolate these things. But there are, of course, like it's not, you can't just compartmentalize a person's body, or all of those things affect other things. For example, mouse, the size of a mouse, the mass of a mouse affects how fast his heart beats, and like all other things. Like if you're going to test drug on mouse, like because of it has small size, it has very uh, it's very high, a very high heartbeat, and uh, uh, very high or very low. I think it's very low. I don't know, but it has a very radically different heartbeat than that of humans. So even you can't really isolate these things, like these things affect. And in cancer, these are 93% chance. When you talk about other diseases, like very specific diseases, Parkinson's, like these numbers go even below 93%, but even higher than 93%. Like as far as like if the proposition says like any kind of testing is justified, then of course like at least some kind of testing is justified. Then we may as well toss a coin of who wins this debate, like whoever gets a bad proposition. Like I think a much more interesting proposition would be to like whether a particular proponent diseases uh, such as cancer and other, which generally are harmful to animals, are whether or not they are justified or not. um, Secondly, you can't like bring up but like a COVID drug and say like this passes the cost benefit analysis. You have to look the class of drugs, and they don't seem to pass the cost benefit analysis. um, what else? Yeah, as far as the difference between a mentally challenged human and mentally challenged animal is that it's just that other humans will have get psychological, will psychologically affected by it. People get psychologically affected by lots of things. People get psychologically affected by what other people do, same as how other people test animals. Like these are, I don't see any meaningful difference between these things. People get psychologically affected when other people trespass on their property. Um, like, like it's. I don't think these are like black and white answer to this thing, whether or not trespassing immoral, immoral. Perhaps there are other constitution, but what else? Yeah, so I don't think that this psychologic how people get psychologically affected, how other humans get psychologically affected, have much bearing on the moral issues, like what is justified and what is not justified. Um, that's about it.
So yeah,
Thanks
thanks for
for thanks for giving me platform,
thanks for debating,
and
guys.
to my interlocutor.
So yeah, thanks for debating, guys.